Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. On behalf of the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement, I welcome you all to the International Conference on Understanding International Migration. I extend a very warm welcome to our distinguished moderator for the session, Professor Bharti Chhibber, fellow scholars and participants who have joined us through Zoom and are watching us live on Facebook. We are glad to witness your presence today. This international forum aims to bring together rigorous and erudite scholars working on the migration issues from all over the world over a single platform. This conference is a full-day event with 11 different sessions, with 2 sessions running parallelly throughout in white and green room. The conference features 73 scholars from 25 different countries who will be delivering their presentation and sharing their understanding on international migration. The session is streaming live on YouTube, so please feel free to share it on your social media handle with hashtag ICUIM2021. Please do follow us on Twitter at Contact NICE and subscribe our YouTube channel, NICE Nepal. This is the third session of the conference. To chair and moderate the session, it's a real pleasure to have Professor Bharti Chhibber here with us. Professor Bharti Chhibber is an assistant professor at Lakshmibai College, University of Delhi. She has been teaching in Delhi University for about 16 years now, with her area of specialization lying in international relation and India's foreign policy. She holds PhD from the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. She is the author of the book Regional Security and Regional Cooperation, a comparative study of ASEAN and SHARC, and has regularly contributed articles and book reviews to mainstream journals and mass media. Without any further ado, ma'am, I request you to take the session forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Shreya, for that generous introduction. Well, at the outset, I think I would like to congratulate Dr. Jaiswal and the whole team at NICE for organizing this international webinar on understanding international migration, because it's a very, very important subject which has been affecting international relations and relations among nations and within the countries for a very long time. However, owing to the pandemic, it has assumed significant, rather I would say it has assumed new significance owing to the pandemic problem that we have been facing. So with that, I think I've seen the program detail. We have some very interesting speakers who will be speaking on very different aspects of international migration here. And since this particular session 3 talks about climate change and the environmental issues, so I look forward to a very engaging session with our panelists today. And since environmental issues or climate change, it talks about different dimensions from floods, droughts, deforestation, reducing economic opportunities, resulting in demographic displacements. So I think I would reserve my comments for further down the line during the webinar and look forward to engaging presentations from our participants. I'll invite the first participant that we have today is R. Nelum Uttamadasa. She's a lecturer in Open University of Sri Lanka, and she'll be speaking on climate-induced migration, a case study from South Asia. So over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to join with you today. First of all, let me share my presentation with you. Right. So my topic today is climate-induced migration, case study from South Asia. Climate change is a global problem and is a central issue in contemporary international relations. However, the conceptualizing the link between human mobility and the climate change is a complex phenomenon. There are the terms such as environment migration, climate change-induced migration has been used interchangeably in scholarly work. If you look at the link between human mobility due to climate stresses. It has been in the history, so it's not a completely new phenomenon. So my study aims to understand the complex nature of human migration driven by climate change in South Asia, and its impact, and especially importance of mainstream the topic in policy discourse in the regional level. So this is basically a secondary research conducted by analyzing both qualitative and quantitative data from various sources. So if we look at how climate change affecting South Asia, so mainly the sea level rising, the changes in rain patterns, uh, increase of temperature and glacial melting in Nepal, and water depletion and water salinization. And we have drought, cyclones, and flooding and landslides continuously affecting the region for last decades. Recently, also, if you look at the recent history of the cyclones, which is affecting the South Asia, we have seen that that has been affecting countries like Sri Lanka, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, India, particularly for especially for last few decades. Recently, we have lots of more than like millions of displacement due to cyclones, flooding, landslides, and droughts in the region. So when I'm looking at climate change migration, I will be taking the definition of International Organization of Migration in order to understand the nature of the climate change induced migration. According to IOM, climate induced migration or climate migrants, they refer the climate migrants as persons or group which has been which are obliged to move from their habitual homes and within their country or within their country of residence or internationally due to compelling changes of climate. When we look at the climate change induced migration with related to South Asia, uh, there can be various forms of migration. There can be involuntary, voluntary, or the resettlements, and the displacement, internal displacement due to the climatic changes, especially that migration also will be driven by also the other compelling causes or the factors in the changes of the climate change. So if we look at South Asia, the region has been so the region has been a hotspot for climate change. If we look at the map here, according to Climate Risk Index in 2020, the red areas shows that how versely the South Asian region has been affecting to climate change. And if you look at examples from South Asia, the sea level rising, changes in rainfalls has been affecting most of the countries, especially the countries who are low-lying, who are in low-lying areas like Maldives, Bangladesh, and coastal cities of India and Sri Lanka has been continuously been facing the risk of climate change. Especially when we look at the case of Maldives, it's a very alarming conditions, and also for the Bangladesh. And the problems of emanating from the climate change also can affect the increase in the migration of people, because climate change would cause disruptions to disruptions in agricultural sector, which is where the most of the South Asian countries are still dependent on agricultural sector. So the changes in rain patterns and especially the droughts can also affect in deciding people's movement across the borders or within the country. Because the climate change is climate change has a spillover effect, which can spill over into other aspects like people's livelihoods, economic conditions, and especially the issues of human security issues like water security and water security, economic security, and health security, as well as security of the livelihood of the people, and also water security and food security. So these combination of these factors could affect the migration of, could decide the human mobility due to climatic changes. Right. So when we look at the data available about climate change induced migration, so according to some of the scholarly work, that there will be 40% of natural disasters recorded globally occur in South Asia. And the recent 2018 World Bank report projects that 55% of developing world population is at risk, with the 143 million forced to migrate by 2050 because of the climatic change. So this World Bank report also predicted that there can be 40 million migrants could be predicted from the South Asian region. But in terms of if the South Asia takes better care of the adaptation and mitigation policies of climate change, that can decrease to 20 million of migrants as predicted in the World Bank report in 2018. Internal Displacement Monitoring Century, according to their data, they predicted in 2011 that there can be around 3,500,000 displaced in South Asia due to climatic changes. When we look at the climate risk index, it's visible that South Asia is worstly affected by climatic changes, because according to 2020 climate risk index, the countries in South Asia, Afghanistan and India occupy 6th and 7th places in the most affected countries by 2019. And when we look at the top 10 countries most affected, 3 South Asian countries are included in the top 10 most affected countries in South Asia. So when we look at the problem of human migration or the climate-induced migration in the context of South Asia, what the data suggests is that we will have to expect more migrants or the human movements, people's movement due to climatic change within their countries, and that does not rule out the possibility of cross-border migration of people due to climatic changes, because when we think about the current situation, current social, political, economic situation of the region, the countries, these are developing countries, and most of the countries are suffering from poverty, and poverty as well as as the cities when the cities become more populous and does not provide people to sustain within that territories uh, could drive people's migration, people's movement across the borders. So, for example, still traditionally, we are South Asian region is a very resentful about traditional kind of migration happen within the borders. So we have seen that the countries has been in tight control in their borders. But the worst scenarios of climatic changes can produce cross-border climate migration within the South Asian region. And when we look at the responses, how the states, region, and how the international assistance has been supporting for the cause of climate change and its related problems. If we look at the individual countries, we can see almost all the countries have been adopting national frameworks to their policymaking discourses, with including the framework for managing internally displaced people, as well as looking at other aspects of climate change, resettlement, and clean energy, these frameworks has been also developed based on the international conventions like Paris Convention and Kyoto Protocol. So it's a good sign of taking individual states that the problem of climate change into their agendas. And also when we look at the regional responses, especially when we look at the region especially from the SAARC perspective, when you look at SAARC, which is represented by all the South Asian countries, Bangladesh has been vocal about bringing region together for the climate change issues. So which led to several initiatives by South Asian region for SAARC. So according to according to SAARC, there have been several developments, like they have been formed several mechanisms and regional mechanisms to address this issue, and also forming a food bank, and also the they also agreed on several conventions within the region. But the problem of when we are looking at all these frameworks and mechanisms, the problem of problem of SAARC is also not taking proactive role in considering these responses. The problem here is that since this is a problem which has been affecting to all the countries within the region, so the importance of having a regional mechanisms in proactive regional mechanisms has been a very important aspect in fighting with climate change induced migration and other climate change induced issues. So when we look at the findings and conclusions of the study. So the finding of the study projects that the climate change is a pressing factor to the South Asia. According to the data, there is increase of climate-induced displacement rather than cross-border migrants in South Asia. And based on the international IDMC data, according to that, there is increase of climate-induced displacement within South Asia over the past decade. So the South Asia already producing the large scale of migrants as labor migrants and economic migrants who have been decided to migrate into countries due to economic, political, and social issues. And climate change might increase the stress of migration within the region. And several South Asian states already conflicting with border checks, and they control migration emanating from other sources. Therefore, if cross-border migration happen, that will lead to more stress within the region. So that's why we need to have a more proactive regional understanding about this issue. So the poverty in the region might enhance the vulnerability of those affected by climate change and restrict their movement. So there can be people, the trapped communities who like to migrate, but restrict their migration due to several structural factors. And also when I'm doing these studies, what I have come across is there is a very we need more data, more accurate data regarding the climate change and especially climate-induced migration within the region. Because I found it very, there's lack of data with regard to climate-induced migration within the region. When you look at the international publications on climate change migration, so sometimes you will observe that all the South Asian countries might not be represented in those international research papers also, and policy documents. So it's important to think about doing more research on climate-induced migration and contributing to the understanding of the region about this problem. It is required to integration of knowledge, technology, and appropriate policies and institutions to address the impact of climate change within the region and its induced migration. So so I said that there is good acknowledgement from the states, including the climate change induced migration or climate change impact into the region in their policy documents, but then that is also need to be act proactively with that. For that, they need a lot of they need finance, they need knowledge and technology to adopt appropriate policies. And especially, more significantly, what I have understand within the available data in this field, the phenomenon of climate change migration has to be looked at in a security perspective. I think that's in a way is a limitation, and it's a it might completely leave the individual as the agency of policy making, because displacement also need to be considered with the individual experiences, the Otherwise, if we are going to securitize and if you are going to look at this in a traditional security perspective, so what the state would like to do is that they will like to tighten their borders. But I think the bringing individual into the policy discourse is more important when we discuss about climate change induced migration. Yeah, lastly, the lack of quantitative data in the field of climate induced migration need to be addressed, and the knowledge should be created within the all levels, like and this knowledge should be gone to the community level. Yeah, that is the end of my presentation, and thank you.
That was an interesting presentation. And well, as you spoke about different aspects of the problem in South Asia and also try to touch upon the responses using the secondary resources, I have two observations, questions and observation. Probably you can take them up towards the end of the session when we have Q&A session. Well, basically, when we talk about the whole idea of climate refugees, uh, climate or the environmental changes is playing a very, very critical role in addition to many other reasons for refugees, environmental refugees, political, economic, so many other reasons, but climate is playing a very critical role. And South Asia, definitely, we do have many issues related to the environmental degradation and climate change. Um, which actually calls upon broadly defining the security in terms of human security being environment a very critical aspect. You very briefly touched upon the issue of agriculture, because when we talk about climate change, then it's a kind of a threat multiplier. It adds to the already existing threats that are there in the society in terms of human security. So you have the natural disasters, and the climate change exacerbates those disasters. So with the whole issue of water scarcity, which is a very critical issue, whether it's terms of the development issues like building of dams, or whether it's in the context of uh, drinking non-availability of drinking water or less water reservoirs. So it affects the production of the rice, wheat, maize, and fish, which is basically a kind of a staple diet in many regions in South Asia. So what is your take on that? And secondly, you touched upon a very important aspect of the responses where you spoke about regional cooperation, because most of the South Asian countries, they do face uh, problems related to climate change. So since we have seen, although SARC does have some mechanism, for many decades now, they have a granary, they have food security issue, they have energy the energy reports and other reports which actually talk about climate change, and they have been there for many decades. However, it has not fructified as it should have. So we are looking towards a kind of a sub-regional cooperation in addition to the bilateral cooperation. So again, if you could highlight more about sub-region cooperation in the context of climate change in South Asia. So I think probably these two are the observation that you can take up, but it was a good presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome. So we move on to the next speaker. I think our first speaker has joined. So I'll call Dr. Ramabrahmam Vellore. He's assistant professor in Yogi Vemana University, of course, from India. And topic is climate change and international migration and analytical approach. So over to you.
Hello. Hello. Good evening.
Vellore, do you want to share your presentation yourself, or you will share it for you?
Yeah, sir, I have, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
I will share, sir. I will
Okay,
share.
sir. Okay, thank you.
Hello. And
Dr.
Pandu?
Vellore, please share it.
Sir, you share, sir. It is a,
Okay, I'll share it for you. Okay.
yeah.
Okay, please go ahead.
Pandu. ఇది ఇక్కడ రన్ వచ్చింది కదా.
We can hear you. Please start.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're audible. Please go ahead. And I
వాళ్ళే
also
వాళ్ళే
request,
చేస్తారు.
I also
Valid,
request
sir.
the presenters to
Valid.
please stick to the timeline. If they can wind up their presentation in about 10 minutes or so, that will be great.
వాళ్ళు చేశారు. Hello, sir. Please share, sir,
it again.
the
Please share
presentation.
it again because you are sharing from both the sides. Please share the slide again.
Sir, you share, sir. Hello.
Okay, I share it. Okay.
Hello.
Okay, please continue.
Yeah. What is కనిపించట్లేదు side లో. So my
I'll
paper
change
is
the
a climate. Yeah. So my title of the paper is Climate Change and International Migration: An Analytical Approach. The interactions between the population change, climate change, and migration are complex. New population trends will have impacts on climate change and on the uh, likelihood of migration. Moreover, different populations will be differentially affected by climate change and will either choose or be forced to migrate or to adapt to climate change. So, evidences of climate change. Actually, average change in earth temperatures from 1951 to 1980 is 0.03 degrees centigrade, and from 1985 to 2005 it is about 0.35 degrees centigrade. Next. Hello, next slide, please. Hello.
Please go ahead, Dr. Vellore. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So coming to the climate change impacts on migratory species, and so first of all, we should know the weather and climate are not the same thing. Hello. Please change the slide. So these are some of the issues on climate change in the places of Marshall Islands. And coming to the international agreement on the protection of environment or climate migrants appears unlikely, building on existing institutions and legal agreements, and some of the regional solutions we'll see. Hello. So coming to the climate change, because of these environmental pollution, once again, on some of the factors like smoke and pollutant from factories, and this shows that the pollution aspect is also very important in the process of these migrations. Next slide, please. And the deforestation is also play an important aspect on these migration, and some effects of these some of the important effects of climatic change are. Next slide, please. An average increase in Earth's temperature during the last century and the melting of polar ice, and the animals are drowning. Migrating birds are forced to change their time and place of migration. A melting of glaciers will lead to higher sea level, which will cause floods and put many low elevation regions at risk of disappearing underwater. Longer summers can disrupt animal habitation, and new and widespread diseases because of warm climate. Damaged crops due to sudden climate change and floods, and average precipitation increase around the world, and droughts and heat waves, extreme winters and storms, hurricanes, typhoons, and mold wildfires. Next slide, please. Next slide. So coming to these migration, nearly 1 lakh migrants have crossed the Mediterranean in the year 2015, according to the reports. Next slide, please. And this is the graph, everything you want to know about these migration across these Mediterranean aspect. And according to this graph from Germany, Sweden, Italy, France, Hungary, UK, Austria, and Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, etc. The sources from the Economist. And in the same way in Italy also, migrants by the sea. Next slide, please. Some implications for research. So because as early as 1990, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, noted that the greatest single impact of climate change might be on human migration, with millions of people displaced by shoreline erosion, coastal flooding, and agricultural disruption. So according to the Professor Mayer's estimate of 200 million climate migrants. So earlier slide, please. Earlier slide. So Professor Mayer's estimate of 200 million climate migrants by 2050 has become the accepted figure cited in respected publications for the IPCC to the Stern Review of the Economics of Climate Change. In 1918, the World Bank estimated that 3 regions, Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia, will generate 143 million more climate migrants by 2050. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. So understanding these trapped populations, coming to the Burma, nearly a population of 50 million were affected in 2008, and nearly so many people are also died. And coming to the Somalia, nearly 9 million people, nearly more people are of risk of death in Somalia due to lack of drinking water. Next slide. So coming to the reducing the impacts, so we must do the necessary things like forecasting warnings, structural measures, example, drinking water, and emergency responses. And coming to the reducing exposure of implementing new aspects in agricultural practices. Next slide, please. And in the same way, we must count the alternative energy sources, and what you can do is because of non-polluting factors like cycling uh, and disrupting the things. Coming to the conclusion, migration is not new. It is very complex. Climate, environmental change has always played a big part in migration. Climate change impacts are far-reaching, not just loss of land, also agriculture, health, cities, water, energy, etc. Climate change is a major destabilizing force for democracy, human rights, and rule of law. So, thank you. Thank you, madam.
Well, Dr. Vellore, that was a good presentation, and you highlighted
Yeah.
effects of climate change, and also
Yes, madam.
the kind of responses that can be there. And as the best part of your presentation, which I liked, is that you used a lot of pictures. So that is one kind of a different kind of a thing, but it was good. It added an impact to your presentation. Well, Dr. Vellore, I have 2 observations. One, in your response, you suggested couple of measures, especially for the individual, like cycling and other things. Well, how I see it, that an issue like climate change, we need to have multiple dimensions in order to resolve it. There has to be an international level cooperation, then we come to regional level, then the national level, and then at the community and the individual level. And you did highlight what as an individual we can do. Of course, there can be other initiatives in terms of educational awareness and other things. But when we talk about, because you did showed us a couple of pictures of solar energy and wind energy. So
Yes.
one major that has been suggested, because South Asia and even the Indian, many of the coastal cities in Odisha and other Tamil Nadu and other states, Mumbai, etc. also. So it has been projected that it could be under the threat of submergence. Already we are facing the problem in Sundarbans, under the threat of submergence because of the rising sea levels in the coming decades. So many countries internationally are working on something which is called sea wall in order to protect the coastal cities. So my question would be, can that be building the seawall? Can that be one of the solutions that India could also adopt for our coastal cities? And second, you highlighted through your pictures about wind energy and solar energy. Well, India is doing very well in terms of solar energy, along with many other countries internationally. So do you think that in South Asia, we can collaborate with other countries in terms of solar and wind energy, because we have abundance of that? So towards the end of the session, if you could highlight something on these two issues. At the end,
Thank you.
Dr. Vellore. Yeah, towards the end, yeah. But it was a good presentation.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes, Dr. Vellore. So I'll move on to the next,
thank you.
yeah, welcome. I move on to the next participant. Next, we have Pooja Sharma. She is Assistant Professor, University of Delhi, India. And Pooja will be speaking on mapping migrant, community and environment towards sustainability. So go ahead, Pooja.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So I'm really honored and privileged to speak in NICCE International Conference on International Migration. So I would like to share my screen. Is it visible, ma'am?
We are waiting. We are waiting.
Okay.
Yeah, now it's visible.
It's visible?
Yeah,
so
now it's visible.
Yeah, thank you so much. The topic of my presentation today is mapping migrant community environment towards sustainability. To introduce this topic, we'd first like to take the current facts related to migration. By 2030, it is observed that a huge transition is going to happen regarding the distribution of the human population altogether, witnessing much greater, just 1 minute, much greater number of the people would be located. Just, I think I'm not able to see the slides. A greater number of the people would be located in Africa and South Africa than the other parts of the world. And although the number of people migrating would be same altogether, there may be some changes as far as the numbers are concerned, but the causes would remain same as always. Civil wars, political unrest, famines, economic emergencies, natural disaster, etc. Migration helps in overcoming a lot of challenges. One should think about that also, that angle, that aging of population is taken care of by migration. That is also referred as a replacement migration by UN. The fear of migrants will take over that they will take over all the white collar jobs and manufacturing jobs is a myth, because immigrants have low skill and they usually generally land up with the low skill jobs in the agriculture and the services sector in the developed countries. Emerging aversion against migration is something which we have to tackle and seriously think about. The notion of job displacement should be abandoned. Actually, it is because of the technological change and not because of migration. Another thing is that brain drain, which we always argue that it is happening, but it has been witnessed over the past years that brain, in spite of brain, one angle is looking at a brain drain, the other angle is that you also create entrepreneurs like Wu and Kim, who have been demonstrating power of migrants across immigrants across the world, and everybody gets benefit out of it. They create jobs for the whole world across. So restricting migrants has a very distortionary impact on the Western countries like America, because R&D, all the activities are going to shift towards China, India, and Canada. American economy would really need a larger influx of immigrants for jobs such as nursing, home health workers, cooks, etc. And by 2030, more than half the jobs in US are going to be occupied by immigrants. Further, the claim that the migrants represent a fiscal burden on the destination country is also contradicted by the fact that 72% of the entire international immigrants in the world are working age. And according to the OECD data, 47% of the increase of the workforce in US and 70% in Europe since 1990, contributing taxes and much more to the taxes as compared to the benefits they withdraw from the countries. So among 85 American citizens, who won the Nobel Prize since 2000, around 40% of were the foreign born. And so for America to retain the status of an innovative country, immigration plays a critical role. Now, leaving to the facts, I mean, just putting keeping my presentation a little away and diverse from the facts, I would like to take you to the basic definition of migrant. A person who moves to a country other than his own, and for a period of then several definitions like this by UNSD and others, and who have described migrants. But it has always remained a custodian of certain fundamental of human race. A citizen representing a particular history or culture or tradition of a country, and it reflects a diversity between the recipient country and the country of the origin. This diversity inculcates huge potential of conflicts and situation of war even. However, when adapted strategically, this diversity for the growth and development, it will play an instrumental role in developing, in building people-to-people connectivity between the nations, encouraging people mobility, essentially custodian of one type of cultural identity. It primarily displays the extent of respect, tolerance, adaptability of each one's culture and religion. Nature, if we see in the nature also the idea of existence and coexistence strongly. Nature diffuses love, inculcates non-violence, tolerance in every species. Thus, diversity comes as a basis of sustainability. And consequently, to preserve and maintain this diversity, this should be the foremost motive behind all the nations and multilateral organizations. Within the community, it becomes the responsibility of each member to ensure, preserve each other's sanctity. Adaptability and resilience are the two elements that should imbibe the respect, tolerance, and non-violence, which serves as the genesis of the peaceful community. Now, migration, various scholars have contributed to migration, and it has been related to migrants' experience of trauma and adversity, negative impact on their mental health, environmental crisis, which have been discussed in this flora also, climate migrants and things like this. And they have highlighted the relationship between environment and adaptation, between the openness and closure. And then role of place of attachment is increasing tolerance, and the role played in tolerance and individuals has also been highlighted by the various scholars. The era of the New World is peculiarly marked by the significant expanding diaspora. Canada is one of the examples where it has opened its horizons for everybody to explore their dreams and take care of their desires. Then environment is composed of two type of resources, the natural resources and the social environment. And the fundamental linkage between the individual, community, and another, this is what I'm going to highlight in the presentation. The paper will attempt to examine the interconnection by deploying a comprehensive framework signifying the migrant in connecting the environmental equitability and establish the sustainability over the environment system. Now, in a perspective, this will be viewed from the prism of environmental sustainability and inequitable distribution of nature and socio-economic environment that that drives the entire structural motivation behind the process of migration will be highlighted. The paper attempts to view the process of migration from the perspective of an individual human being, irrespective of inherent reasons of migration, and guided by the psychological, social security, and the economic security of an individual, becomes the integral part of the entire framework. This framework is based on the Gandhian principles of truth and nonviolence. A migrant acquires the characteristics of adaptability, resilience, and cooperation, synthesizing sustainable connectivity with not only between the socio-economic environment, but also the inner world inside a migrant. So, and it is clubbed with the J.C. Kumara's approach of economy of permanence and provides the significance of economic security of the individuals to achieve overall environment settle. So you will see the application of these two ideologies and how they will lead up to a peaceful world order, egalitarian. The man has inherent. So I'm just quickly going through the globalization and a migration base that how are they connected? Man is inherently adapted to phenomena of migration on his growth and betterment, and it is evident from the migrants' product that it has been migrants have been a product of the present globalization, and they are the key drivers of the instruments of the international relation also. It is the presence of boundaries, international relation, and geopolitics that exert the pressure on the free mobility of the people across, and national security issue becomes the major significant concern when you view it from the geopolitics angle. In such a case, migrant is simply an instrument of encouraging bilateral and multilateral cooperation, which seeks to accomplish its aspirations in amidst the geopolitical endeavors. So this is a framework which is quickly telling you about the entire security aspect of migrant. So security, you can divide it into two parts: the psychological and social security and the economic security. And with a so psychological security is actually leading to the inner self, acceptance and resilience. On the economic security, you are connected to the outer world of employment, job, business, and investment. Both of them, they make a community because you're part of a community, and then you move to a destination country. So a destination country is actually, if there's an influx of a community coming from a migrant side, and which is composed of two type of security angles. Okay, and here we apply the Gandhian thoughts and Kumarappa thoughts, and now keeping that into mind, contextualizing the security aspect. The whole process of migration affects not only the inner world of a migrant, but also the outer world. On one side, inner self gets affected psychologically, and social factors are also involved in it. And a migrant who starts his journey in the immigration aspiring for a security, basically primary two types of security. Now it is looking into both the worlds at the same time. The economic security is influenced primarily by the opportunities rendered by the destination world and external world. An economically secure person connects and deals with it deals with the practical challenges of life in a better way if economically secure. And same thing goes for the psychological security also. So a more psychologically healthy and socially connected migrant is emotionally more secure and also guarantees a stronger inner self guided by the tolerance, peace, adaptability, and resilience. Such a migrant will be able to uplift his self-esteem and secures it from the world outside, and is capable of creating a peaceful world outside, community and society all together. And it also experiences in the both inner and outside world, ensures the peaceful community of the environment. Entire journey of the migrant is successful for providing this destination. Both the inner story as well as the outer story witnesses the gradual progression of a migrant to an evolved soul is in a complete sense. Before taking you to the journey of the migrant through inner self-thriving pathway of the outside world, it is essential to examine the very nature of the humanity, and that is the core which lies in the outer world, because evolution of the humankind has happened to the outside world. So adaptability and resilience is a very important aspect for an evolved character. Adaptability is not imitation. It means the power of resistance and assimilation. This was quoted by Gandhi in 1926. Adaptability is a relationship between the person's internal experience conditioned upon the adaptive system and external reality. There are many scholars who have pointed out the role of adaptability and resilience in their work. And so I have quoted all of them. I'm not going through many of them. So from a migrant point of view, the characteristic of adaptability is engineered in to bring forth the strength of their inner willpower and self-confidence and self-respect. It will then give them the opportunity to reinforce the truth that lies, and one can visualize the peaceful world after that. So interlinkage between the inner self and the outer world from the Gandhian perspective. So during this journey of immigrant, a tolerant, adaptive, and resilient migrant would be able to handle the adverse circumstances in the outer world in a better way, as a migrant will be resilient, as compared to a person or a migrant who is resilient, impatient, and intolerant. The value system of this adaptability and tolerance in the inner self of a migrant can be manifested by adopting a particular thought, the particular thought advocated in the process of life by propagated by Mahatma Gandhi. Truth and nonviolence inculcates essential characteristics of adaptability and resilience. Nonviolence is a translate. It's basically the word is ahimsa, and it means the largest love ever and the greatest charity. Truth is the ultimate reality that pertains to the religious pursuit realized by this term called as satyagraha. Satya is by the term satya basically mean that it is the truth, and it is truth along with the existence. So it's the existential truth. And a migrant with it, which is enriched by the inner self, well endowed with these elements, will be able to handle the skills and the education enhancement in the world outside in a better way and take the benefits of the fruits. Now, J.C. Kamarappa, I would like to quickly quote on his point of view that everything begins somewhere and ceases to exist somewhere. This was pointed out by him, and the term permanent was the term emphasized as a concept of that surpasses beyond the time and space. Then human intellect falls short of comprehending this notion of permanence. And that is why he proposed what is called as economy of permanence. Nature, however, is consists of permanent in comparison to the human life that is transient. Human life, according to him, is transient. Since a man consumes from nature for his survival and existence, so he coined a term called as economy of permanence. The notion of economy of permanence advocates like this, that the process of consumption of an economy that has the potential to remain sustainable. It has a potential to remain sustainable, but we have not been following that path. An economy that relies more on the permanent elements of nature as compared to the stocks will ultimately be more sustainable. Apart from the philosophy prescribed from the consumption of pathway of an economy, the fundamentals of J.C. Kumarappa also propagates the lesson of individuals to base their life on this philosophy. So he propagates that the individual should attempt to become a flow, since the very nature of the flow is permanent. So it's little contradictory because people think that flow is not permanent. It is actually the flow is permanent, and flow is a context reflects that the sustainable goal or nature of the individual to perceive a sustainable life and the purpose. In that context, it is permanent. An individual who adapts the nature of a flow like a river and floats with time, progressing towards the achieving each step laid down by the betterment of, is the one who will live successfully and sustainably. He should never become a stock, as it tends to confine himself or himself to a place. So that is also kind of leading to the migration point of view, that one has to become a flow and not get stuck up at one place. So migrant who started his journey as an endeavor to accomplish his goal and desires is an individual who is a seeker of knowledge, who when he pursues the journey of life through these two aspects, he places himself as a building block or the foundation of the entire. And this is a world order which we can see from this chart, that he becomes the building block of the entire environmental sustainability framework. So you can see the individual migrant as a base, and then you can see that how the two type of securities come out from him and they make a community, and how the adaptability resilient aspect on the left hand side, as you can see, can affect their psychology. Skills and jobs will affect the economic security, and then they will make community, and then further the nation. And nation uses two types of resources, natural resources and socio-political resources, through their process of production and consumption. And socio-economic interaction of the nation is through the cooperation, globalization, integration, all regional integration and multilateral cooperation and everything. So that makes a social political environment. And they all get affected by an individual. A single individual has the capacity of affecting all what is there above. So the entire structure gets affected by a single individual migrant, and it finally affects the environment altogether. Waste and emissions, war, fear, and unrest, everything is linked to this. And thus, egalitarian, non-violent, non-exploitative world order is something which we are looking forward to. And Earth has enough resources to meet people's need, but it never has enough resources to satisfy everybody's greed. And this is something pointed out by Mahatma Gandhi. An individual characteristic will contribute to the community two prominent ways: the economic dimension and the socio-political dimension. So he is a propagator of the way of life that generates and evolves inner self. Such an individual will become a part of the parcel of the social construct. He becomes the messenger of the tolerance, cooperation, selflessness, truth, and nonviolence, thus creating a peaceful community, and translates the nation with a strong foundation of humanity, peaceful social order, equality, and respect for the humanity. Such a nation is beyond the construct of, towards the construct of a sustainable environment, and the method of production and consumption of destroying the natural integrity of the resources in the form of the land and mineral, that is avoided by the philosophy of J.C. Kumarappa approach. And I would just quickly like to wind up. When the individuals are simply in a peaceful state within themselves, they are more resilient and adaptable. And principles of truth guide them to nonviolence and would finally conceive a notion of satisfaction and contentment. And such an individual which visualize the future generation, that is very important. It will realize the need of the future generation and ultimately the environmental sustainability. The notion prescribed by Kumarappa reinforces the significance of being sustainable through the notion of the stock and flow. Nature is permanent, so that has already been discussed. It encourages cooperation, mutual aid, promoting notion of collectiveness and harmony, and epitome of all activities in the human survival. So the final take is that the individual migrants influenced by these thoughts would be leading to a just welfare state which is inclusive in nature. At an international level, Gandhian perspective tend to promote cooperation and integration to ensure just and peaceful world order. And a community represented by this APEC model is not only most environmentally sustainable, but also deserves a remarkable model of the peaceful world. So this is what the take is. It will be devoid of all the unrest and civil wars and international wars, whatever it could be. So this is, thank you so much for listening and having patience.
Well, that was an interesting presentation, Pooja, and it's quite interesting how you highlighted the Gandhian approach, and especially in the context of the sustainable world. And you spoke about how the migrant population, they can be more resilient, and the whole idea of adaptability. And of course, Gandhi has what he has spoken about is kind of a simple living and high thinking, with minimum needs. So that's very critical approach in contemporary times, not only related to the whole idea of migration or climate change, but so many other problems that society is facing national and internationally. However, when we talk about climate change, or when we talk about the migrants, whom you have asked to be more resilient or adapt, to the new situation and contribute to the economy of the country, well, it's always a two-way process. because these migrants, one, they are moving, whether it's migration is within the country from one place to another, or whether it's an international migration. They are moving, one, because of the scarcity of the resources, and also the climate persecution, right? So that is the one reason. But when they go to some other location, whether it's within the country or beyond the international borders, then there also there is the same problem, because the people, the local people or the indigenous people, they feel threatened by it. They feel there will be demographic changes, they feel there will be social insecurity, and already there may be scarce resources over there. So it will be more pressure on the scarce resources. So rather than being assimilative, or rather than acceptance, what they face is kind of lot of rather there should be the kind of stigma. Okay, these are the migrant population who may be putting pressure not only on resources but on the ecosystem, further creating problem for the environment. So that is the general impression that goes, and in this context the whole idea comes, how the migrant population can be more acceptable in the place where they are going, without creating any kind of animosity or even conflict, which may result in a conflict between two countries also. So that is something very critical. So probably if you can highlight your viewpoints on that, because ultimately when they go there, they also put the pressure on the ecosystem. So rather than sustainable development, it can be further unsustainable development. So towards the end of the webinar,
Sure,
you can share
sure.
your
I'll do
observations on that. Yeah. Yeah, now we go to our next presentation. Next, we have Richa. She's a Senior Research Fellow, Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee, India, and she'll be speaking on climate change, natural disasters, and human displacement, an economic perspective. So over to you, Richa.
So,
Unmute, yeah.
greetings to everyone. Thank you, NIIC, for giving me this opportunity. Let me just share the slides, ma'am. Is it visible, ma'am?
Yes, Richa. Yeah, it's visible.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So the paper that I'm presenting today is titled as Climate Change, Natural Disasters, and Human Displacement Perspective. And the nature from the arguments derived from the existing literature, the experts' opinions, and their understanding of the issue, both theoretically and empirically. So the presentation goes this way: the introduction, literature review, which will be mainly talking about the stylized facts related to the issue that we are taking up, and the climate-induced disasters and its impact on human displacement in case of India. Again, we will talk about perceptions, reasoning, and responses of the people who are on the move, and conclusion, and it will provide some scope for the future research. So to begin, implications of migration trends using stylized facts with figure, and why this study should be above mentioned framework that we are mentioning here. So this is done because of issues and factors that affects mobility in the face of climatological crises. So there is there is a complete history of extreme events, as is already discussed by two speakers of the, and there are different terminologies as highlighted by Uttamadasa, this lecturer who's talking. So there are many terminologies like climate change, migrants, refugees, evacuee. There are many different terminologies, and it is a kind of confusion that what should be actually or how should they be treated, because there is a different kind of treatment with different terminologies that we are using in case of primarily qualitative in nature, and they have not actually, because of the data limitation, they could not explore the measurements of this kind of climate induced the volume of climate induced migration in Africa and Asia.
I think Richa got disconnected.
Okay, then probably we can move on to next speaker, and Richa can join us after the speaker. Will that be fine?
Sure, ma'am.
Right. Okay, next we have Chitkela Rakesh. He's a student from Central University of Kerala, India, and he'll be analyzing the impact of
Ma'am,
climate
Richa has
change.
joined, so maybe.
Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
everything fine.
Okay, Richa, then you can continue. After that, we'll call you Rakesh. Yeah, Richa, please continue.
Yes. Richa, please share your slide again. Unmute yourself and continue.
I'm really sorry for that problem.
No problem, Richa. Go ahead. No
Yes,
problem.
yeah. There's some disturbance in the network. Yeah, so I was talking about the issue that we are taking up. So there is that I already mentioned that there is a problem that economic theories have consciously or like the subconsciously they have ignored the term environmental induced migration. So this has been this has been defined, the term defined by IOM, International Organization for Migration, in 2008, as when people are forced to leave their homes and native places due to sudden or long-term changes in the local surroundings or their environment in order to get livelihood and shelter when they face severe problems at their place of origin. So they have to move to some other places. So this is a problem that has been highlighted by that has been recognized by International Organization of Migration. So further about the review, we are considering the number of economic theories in this context. So there are models of migration. There are many theories of migration. I can't explain these theories in detail time. So these basically these theories, most of these theories have considered economic factors as the primary reason for migration. But few theories like new economics of labor migration, as proposed by Stark and others in 1982, they have considered that migration could be an outcome of factors beyond economic reasons. They also explain that migration is not just an individual decision, but it depends upon the complete household decision towards migration. So again, we have number of theories like network theory of migration, gravity model, Sajasthas model of 1960. These theories actually provides us a scope to incorporate the incorporate the environmental factors or any factors which are not directly observable, but it triggers migration or it triggers mobility. In short, so there are theories, but they do not talk directly about the environmental change. However, NELM gives the scope to incorporate the theory. So next, just a second. Yeah. So the empirical review talks about the stylized fact, and this is the main contribution of the paper. So here we consider the 6 Asian economies and based on their vulnerability scales. So these countries have been identified on the basis of high incidence of deadliest, costliest natural disasters that have happened over the year 1980 to 2018 in terms of high internal displaced population. So this report is published by NatCat Service Mimicry Report. Every year it gets published. So we are using for a report for 2019. So this figure is in this figure we have used two indicators. One is displaced population, which has been taken from the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center report, and again we have taken up Gain Index, which has been collected from the Notre Dame Global Adaptation in Global Adaptation Institute. Yeah. So this Gain Index is composed of mainly the exposures, the severity, and the capacity to adapt capacity to adapt to negative impacts of climate change of a country. And also it includes like under that composition of the index, it includes food, water, the basic habitat, and the environmental factors and infrastructure of the nation or the economy that is being taken up. So we are taking here six Asian countries, and in this slide you can observe that there is a negative relationship between the global adaptation index and the displaced population, meaning that if there is a high adaptability of a country, then the country will witness a lower displaced population, and this is consistent over the years. However, in China we see different kind of phenomena that is on account of China's China has a larger population. That's why we may observe this kind of relationship in case of this economy. Further, as we have already observed that there is a relationship between adaptation adaptation and displacement. So now further we are talking about another stylized fact, which is disaster risk reduction, how it may fuel migration. So climate change, we cannot observe it directly, or the impacts cannot be observed directly. So we are using natural disasters in this context, and we assume that the variation in climatic factor, they induces the natural disasters, which are quite short term and unpredictable in nature. So the disaster risk reduction, it is defined as the systematic way of identifying, measuring, and reducing the disaster risk. As defined by UNISDR in 2009. So the disaster risk reduction incorporates four factors. Basically, we are taking up here four factors. One is the availability of earning opportunity, that is the economic reason. Another one is the information flow. Third one is budget, and the fourth one is state regulation. So if there will be like less earning opportunities would be available post disaster, the information flow is not timely, and budget to mitigate is not appropriate, state regulation is weak, poor governance system exists there, then in that case the chances of mitigating the risk of the disasters would be very, very less, and it would translate into the likelihood of migration, and the chances of the migration would be very high from the state or the place that is getting affected due to natural disasters induced by the climate change. The third stylized fact is basically about that this particular problem is a major crisis for agrarian economies, which is mainly dependent upon the agriculture sector. And these economies mostly exist in the South Asia, Africa, and East Asia, as identified identified by many existing studies, Rajan and others, Dalman and others. There are quite good study and quite large number of studies which have talked upon this issue. So the studies observed that temperature variation has negative relationship with farm output in the semi-arid and arid regions, and therefore triggers migration temporarily, as identified by few studies. Further, again, there is a belief that that the climate-induced disasters may have an impact on the livelihood sources of the people, and that could affect their livelihood sources, and they may choose to migrate from their origin to some other countries or some other states, regions, whatever they feel like. So these interlinkages could be explained by the bounded rationality theorem, like which suggests that an individual could take a rational decision to a certain extent only, but beyond the factors that are that are beyond control, they cannot. They become indifferent between the different strategies choices that are available for them under the uncertain situation. It has been taken from the Simon 1957. So now we are talking about climate-induced natural disasters and human displacement in India. So I have given a table which has been which has been compiled from the census data, the series migration over the 3 decades, 1991, 2001, and 2011. But one thing that I would like you can see from the table that there is an increasing trend over the year. However, we can see that interstate migrants from the last resident 0 to 9 years is permanent residents are not increasing significantly over the last decade. But however, the interstate migrants have been increasing in large numbers over the last decade. This means that there might be a possibility, because many of the studies have already highlighted that the internal migration is mainly the outcome of the climate induced disaster, but not the international migration or the long distance migration. So this could be possibly translated to this particular scenario, that where interstate migration is increasing, means person is moving from one district to another district, one region to another region in the same state or in the same boundary. So again, we have talked about the migration scenario over the 3 decades, but now we are talking about the rainfall and temperature variation, which has been calculated by using the IMD grid data, Indian Meteorological Data Department's grid data that have been processed using GIS, and we have calculated and we have observed that the states that have been identified in the Dalman and Milok studies are confirmed here, that these are the states that are witnessing, like Bihar. You can see from the decadal rainfall variability, you can see Bihar, Assam, then there is Rajasthan also, and some other states are there which are facing this problem like more severely compared to other states. And again, when we're talking about temperature variation, again the same kind of observations are there. Still, we include Delhi in this, and like here Odisha is there, then Karnataka is also there, that is witnessing the temperature variation of that is in witnessing more temperature variation in comparison to other states. So this gives us a picture of that how some states who are already economically backward, and they're also facing this problem at the same time, and that could that could translate to the higher number of out migrants from the states. Again, talking about the perceptions, reasons, and responses. So before moving, like we have already explained that how people are fragile, or they are they are vulnerable to these climate change issues. So this is given, but the problem is that they do not they just don't migrate because of this reason, but there are number of factors that they consider before they choose to migrate. There is a number of there is a complex set of questions that they have to address before they choose to migrate, or choose to stay back at their place of origin, or their homes. So there are reasons like sense of belongingness, family, culture, community-based strategies, or a trapped population. Trapped population means those who cannot actually move. They don't afford the cost of migration. And here are the reasons to migrate. There are reasons, number of reasons: economic, safety issues, conflicts, threats of future calamity. These are the possible reasons that, but these studies have advocated that the economic reasons are the most significant reason of migration. Lastly, we are talking about the problems, but none of the studies, those studies who have highlighted that the migration could take place due to natural disaster, but they have not explored much about the problems at the destination. So few studies have explained that thing, that unemployment, I don't know. They may face a problem at like unemployment, belongingness crisis, conflict between local and outsiders, and the demographic transition. Demographic transition means the most of understand. Am I audible?
Yes, Richa, you're audible. You can continue, and yeah, you can just.
I don't know why my slides are not.
No problem. We can conclude.
Yeah, I'm just concluding. So the next section is on conclusion. So basically the existing literature says that this relationship is that relationship between climate change and migration is interlinked with the natural disasters triggered by climate change. Also, it says that this is a problem for the agricultural economies. And in addition to that, this is that often due to loss of land and unavailability of alternate opportunities due to natural disasters such as floods, droughts, landslide, hailstorm. Different geographies have different kind of natural disasters that they face. So they choose to migrate to nearby villages, town, cities, or even the further places such as metropolitan cities or their national territory. But very few instances of international migration has been noticed in case of climate-induced disasters. Again, the understanding of climate change is a long-term issue, whereas the disasters being faced by them is a short-term is of short-term nature, and also the decision to migrate is also a short-term decision process. So temporal differences arise between the phenomena. So it is difficult to study them in a single frame. However, the methodologies are being devised and they are in development process, where we may develop certain kind of methodology that could actually study these things. Finally, the issue is highly geospecific and nature of the problem changes swiftly from one geography to another, and therefore generalization of the results is not possible from these studies. So lastly, the slide, let's say I would conclude with the future scope for the research. And this future research could aim at exploring the quantitative aspect. As I already mentioned in the introduction section, that there have been a number of studies who have talked about the relationship in qualitative sense, but it is not explored in quantitative, or they have not measured the relationship much. Further researchers may also see the local level resilience, because it is a highly geo-specific issue and it cannot be done in a secondary level analysis, or could not be done, or policies cannot be designed on that basis. Again, perception and attitude of people towards climate-induced migration could also be explored through conducting field surveys at targeted sites where these problems are more acute in nature. Like you can also see the problems that migrants are facing at the place of destination. However, there is ample scope of research on the issue, but of course there are some limitations. Like issues quite multidisciplinary and in nature, and it needs a greater knowledge base. Again, availability of data source is both on climatic factors, migration, and even this disaster is very limited, and it limits the use of statistical tool and econometric modeling to check the relationship and measure this volume of migrants due to climate-induced disasters. Again, the understanding related to control factors in conducting empirical research is highly subjective. Like some people or some experts may opine that the GDP would be a good factor to control the biasness, but some others says that it would be good if we consider the urbanization factor, or the inflation rate, or some other things in a state, or in a geography could be used to study the issue in empirically, and using these control factors. These, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Again, a very
Thank you
interesting.
very much.
Yeah, again, an interesting presentation. Okay, Richa, very quickly, you made a distinction between climate-induced migration and natural disasters in terms of short and long term. So a quick question, which you can answer a little later, is, and you also gave the examples of Bihar and other states in India. So how important is pre-warning system in terms of natural disaster? Since Bihar, regularly every year we are having the flooding problem. it has not been resolved, and how important is prevention and rather than post-disaster conflict management. So probably you can answer that towards the end of the session. Okay, now I request the next two speakers to be very, very brief because we are running late and we need some time for the for discussion also. So next we have Rakesh, and Rakesh, he'll be speaking on analyzing the impact of climate change as a major driver for human migration. Over to you, Rakesh.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Is my screen is visible to you?
Yes, it's visible.
Good afternoon, everyone. I extend my greetings to everyone who are all virtually attending this conference, especially to the Professor Bharti and other personalities attending this. And I'm honored and privileged to present my paper presentation in your virtual presence. So I'm Rakesh. I'm from India, studying at Central University of Kerala. So the title of my paper presentation is Analyzing the Impact of Climate Change as a Major Driver of Human Migration. A bit introduction for my paper presentation. Climate change has become a major concern for international community today. Among its consequences, its impact on migration is the object of increasing attention today. Climate change is having a far-reaching effect on agriculture and food security, which has become a reason for people to leave from rural areas to the towns around the world. Historically, people used to leave the homes and the home countries due to civil wars and political instability and hunger and poverty. But today, the growing number of extreme weather events linked to climate change are increasingly contributing to the migration today. Due to the increased
Rakesh, if you can just switch off your camera, just present and switch off your camera. I think you will able to have better bandwidth. And once again, please wind up in another 7 minutes.
Rakesh, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah, I think there was. Okay, okay, I'll just. So we all know what is the migration means. Now let's see the climate migration. So it's very clear that the people are called as a climate migrants when they leave their own homes and home countries when due to the extreme impact of the climate change on their lives and livelihood. And environment displaced persons are the people who who leave the country within the country and or crosses the international boundary due to the environmental degradation. I'm unable to go for the next slide.
You can just explain to us, Rakesh. You can just explain to us what are your other points.
Uh, yeah. disaster displacement. So I think everyone of us know it. So this is the situation when people are forced, they leave their homes and places in order to avoid the effects of disasters triggered by natural hazards. And below you can see the infographic, which clearly says you like what are the new displacement that took place in 2019, 5 million, and Philippines, Bangladesh, and China, and United States. And this is another picture like which clearly says you the new displacement that took place by like the conflict and the disasters. And you see India, Bangladesh, China, and like with the highest number of displacement that took place in 2019. And
Okay, I think he got disconnected. Till the time he joins back, I'll ask the final speaker.
and I'm back.
So you are here. Okay, please conclude as early as possible. Yeah.
Ma'am, mine is quite brief. Would it be good if I start first and then give the rest of the time to Rakshi?
Well, we already are running behind schedule. It's time for Q&A already. So, Rakesh, can you just give us your conclusions so that we can go to the final speaker? Rakesh, can you just give us your conclusion? Yeah, so that we can go to the next. Yeah. Then perhaps during the Q&A, if we have time, you can just sum up whatever additional thing you want to say, right?
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
Rakesh, please unmute yourself.
You want me to continue, sir?
Please
Rakesh,
make your conclusion, Rakesh. I think slide is not necessary. Please go with your conclusion.
Just give us your conclusion in a minute, Rakesh.
Okay, ma'am. Hope my slide is visible to you all. And I can go for the next slide.
It's visible. It's visible. Please go to conclusion.
Yeah, please go to the conclusion.
Okay, actually, most of my slides, like it's related to conclusion, but unfortunately, maybe it's because of network, I couldn't share you all. But it was very unfortunate to me. Yeah, the climate change has become a major driver because there are a lot of places like if you talk about if you take some examples like Kiribati, which is a small island, and like Tuvalu is one other place in Maldives. So these are some places like, which soon going to disappear just because of the high sea level, like which really, makes every climate activist or like some people are very much concerned about climate, it's very hard. And not only that, because it's showing its impact on the human migration too. And okay, and there are some initiatives being taken by many states like Paris COP and Syndic Agreement, and we have different initiatives taken by like the Global Compact for Migration. Like these are some initiatives. Hope these all agreements would reach to all its targets, and hope this would reduce human migration. Actually, I'm a little disappointed. Like, thank you anyway.
No problem, Rakesh. It was a good presentation. Sometimes these technical things happen. We saw your presentation and we heard your good points. So absolutely a very good presentation. We'll come back to you in Q&A session. Now, very quickly, we go to our final speaker for the day. We have Sanyan Phoebe Mo. She's from Soka University, Japan, and she'll be speaking on sustainable practice and migration. Over to you.
Thank you very much. So in solidarity, I feel very bad for you, Rakesh. So I will also just jump to my conclusion to, to show, concern for the amount of work you've put in. And I'll just jump really quickly to show my final slides. I hope you guys can see it.
Yes, please go ahead.
So my research was built on a book that I read. It's kind of an opinion piece about Sri Lanka post-war violence, and then it kind of demonstrated the kind of ignorance that's been portrayed by government agencies of not basically giving citizenship to these people, to withhold equal rights to individuals because of nationalism and nationalistic concerns. Another one is about Singapore and Vietnam. And this was written before in the onset of pandemic. So this was written in 2019, November. So it was the onset of COVID-19, and at that time, there was already a lot of shaking in infrastructure that we've observed. And at that time, I wrote an opinion piece about the need for global citizenship and Soka education system, of how education that seeks to enhance compassion and nonviolence behavior in individuals is crucial for us to practice peace on a daily basis. And then Soka education also about cultivating how do we motivate individuals to become happier right where they are, and how that happiness can help us to lead to compassion in terms of lifting each other up. And then finally, in conclusion, is because of the ignorance to the human rights that is detriment to the nation's own constitution, and that ineffective government ought to be outlawed because it does not protect people. And education should teach the study of practice, which is how do we practice our lives and how we should live in accordance to each other. So that's it. Thank you. Bye.
Well, Sanyan Phoebe, you actually said before that you have a very short presentation, and you have actually did that. Well, it was short, but definitely very critical. And one very important aspect that you highlighted, that is importance of happiness and happiness and values in education. So which is something that in India also we are working towards right from the school education. So that's a very critical aspect. So in the observations, I'll go by the order that we started. Perhaps my question to you would be if you could just highlight more about this happiness quotient in the Soka education. If you could just highlight more on that, what exactly it contains and how it helps. What are the results? What are the implications? And how successful it has been here. Okay.
Yes, thank you. It's based on humanistic education philosophy, which has many sub-branches. Soka education in particular focuses on this philosophy idea that each individual can create beauty, gain, and good through each interaction. So it's about shifting perspective in the everyday phenomenon that we tend to find ourselves in. So for COVID-19 situation, a lot of times, so there were two aspects to my argument. One was the reasons why migration laws or migration policy is so difficult to implement is because governments themselves don't honor their promises. So Singapore at that time when the Vietnam War happened, migrants were allowed to come in, but they were supposed to be temporarily staying in Singapore because Singapore is a small country. But the larger countries such as France and the British were not able to take them in at a certain point, and so they went against their promise. Vietnamese also did not want to leave Singapore because it's still in Southeast Asia. So that created a lot of problems. So promises that were not honored on the government level, international level, affects people on the local level. So how do we actually overcome that? We actually need global citizenship perspective, which is for us to actually, first of all, overcome our need for violence. I think Gandhi has said this very clearly. Soka education pedagogy focuses on that inherent potential that we can change our perspective on every situation by recognizing the value we can create at the moment. So it's from micro to macro. And that requires a whole school system. So there are many activities that I personally have done as an educator, helping people to engage with differences, embracing differences, finding that diversity is a natural phenomenon of being a human. You know, it helps us to overcome discrimination and prejudice about various communities. And the goal is to achieve harmonious coexistence. And the reason why COVID-19 was a big phenomenon for humanity to self-check was we did not recognize that ignorance exists in all of us. And to transform that awareness is what education is about. So it's still going back to the reasons why people are still fundamentally choosing to be ignorant was because our education system do not always honor that humanity as a whole is so human security approach, humanity as a whole is more important than nationalism or race or social status. But the simple fact of being human is enough for us to be willing to reach out to a community. But that's the contradiction. So it's an opinion piece. It wasn't really a research paper.
No,
I hope I answered it.
Yeah, no, absolutely a wonderful presentation, and the idea that you shared with us, Phoebe, about human coexistence, about respecting each other, about inner self, and also about inner self, and also be aware of the surroundings and how to coexist with others, you know, in a very harmonious environment. Absolutely a wonderful initiative of the Soka education. So congratulations on that. Very good. Yes, Rakesh, I'll give you 2 minutes. Just let me go back to all the speakers, and I'll give you. So finally, I start very quickly with the speakers. From the first speaker, very quickly, Vellore, if you can just highlight your observation in 1 minute about your presentation, very quickly, just 1 minute. Just sum up the observation.
So basically my presentation tried to highlight the linkage between climate change and the migration in South Asia. And especially what I wanted to bring into discussion is that we need to have a different approach to understand this phenomenon, because I think the individual has been neglected and has been neglected from the policy discussions and all these policy frameworks that the governments are coming up, right? If I go back to the, can I go back to your question about agriculture?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I actually agree with you that the climate change has a great impact on agricultural sector in South Asia, especially when we look at the flooding, coastal flooding, and changes of rain patterns, as well as the increase in temperature, which has led to problems of water security in South Asia, and also the depletion of water and water salinization, which directly affect the agricultural sector. So in my point of view, I think this should be understood. This is one of the combination of factor which led to migration. It can be temporary migration, like seasonal migrations within a country, and it can also lead to larger migrations when it connected to economic security and livelihood security and other aspect of human security based on that context. So I think what we can do, what the governments are also working on is that thinking about innovative ways like crop diversification or more resilient, identifying more resilient crops, and changes in management in water. These should be taken into consideration by the governments as well as the regions. So when we look at the regional responses, especially on the light of SARC, SARC has been in 2008. SARC has been adopted Dhaka Declaration of Climate Change Action Plan in 2008, and later on they have in a declaration of Dhaka Declaration, they have mainly looking at adaptation to climate change, impact and risk in vulnerable communities, and there are several. They also look at biodiversity aspect and urban settlements and coastal restructures and all that. The problem is, and then they have Thimphu statement of climate change.
We have time constraint, so if you can just wind it up in 30 seconds.
My final point is that though there are many mechanisms and declarations that we have come across, but still we cannot, what we can see is when it comes to regional cooperation, the countries are competing with each other rather than cooperating into cooperating. Especially this can be one area of cooperation which if we do not take this in a very traditional security aspect. Yeah, that's my final.
Thank you, Nelum. Thank you for answering the question. Okay, next we have Dr. Vellore. Dr. Vellore, would you like to highlight something on the solar energy I asked you about very quickly?
Yes, madam. We have asked two issues, madam. The first one is seawalls are usually massive vertical structures used to protect backshore areas from heavy wave action and in lower wave energy environments to separate land from water. So they are in the form of construction of vertical seawalls, a rubble mound wall structure, and third one is a grino wall structure. So coming to the second question, currently the South Asian countries have initiated several efforts to move to alternative types of energy, especially renewable energy, to reduce South Asian countries' over dependence on fossil fuels and manage the growing demand for energy. Coming to the South Asian countries, per capita electricity consumption in kilowatt per hour. So India consumes nearly 644, Sri Lanka 636.3, and Pakistan 457, and Afghanistan 119.8, and Bangladesh 278, and Nepal 554.1. I think. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Dr. Vellore. And very quickly, thank you, Pooja. Pooja, you just have 1 minute to answer the question. I just want to give 2 minutes to Rakesh. Yeah, please.
Okay, ma'am, I just want to communicate this, that through the framework I had communicated two basic forces, demand side and supply side. Demand side was taken care by Gandhi and supply side was J.C. Kumarappa. So from the Gandhian angle, we say minimization of production and consumption. So that takes care of the entire resources. And from the supply side, who are the providers? Here, two basic notions of Kumarappa are most applicable for countries. Why they should provide resources to migrants? First is stock and flow question. Stock, you cannot change the distribution of the natural resources. What you can do, you can just have the mobility of the human race is possible for equitability. Okay, so stock is concentration one thing, which leads to a bad economy, parasite economy, while flow leads to a equality. And then second notion is that the altruistic model value system, which is more based on moral, social, spiritual, and justiceship and justice. These are the few points which are highlighted by the J.C. Kumarappa permanence of economy. From there, which point of view, it is the right and duty of every individual. If you see from the prism of the entire world together at one place, then you need to cater to the demands of every individual. So these that leads to a ecological balance. If you're looking at ecological balance, then that becomes the right of every country to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Pooja. Richa, your final quickly on the pre-warning system in the disaster management.
Yeah, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So, ma'am, your question was that how pre-warning system it can reduce the post-disaster impacts. So, yeah, we all know early warning system helps to reduce economic losses and mitigate the number of deaths, injuries, post-disasters, and by giving the information on like before the disasters to the community that is going to be affected. But the problem with the Bihar, as you highlighted the case of Bihar and Bihar floods. So the case of Bihar floods is like, it is quite different because the river that is getting flooded every year is Kosi, and it is known for the changing its course. and it is difficult to predict the places which will be affected in its next flood. So, despite having a large database on the Bihar floods with the CWC, the Center for Water Commission in India, it has a record of data or the record of floods in Bihar. But
Thank you,
despite that,
Richa. Thank you. Yeah, no
has
problem.
no.
Thank you, Richa.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, 1 minute,
Okay.
Rakesh. Final, quickly, 1 minute,
Okay.
because
Thank you.
next session has to start. Yeah, quickly,
Okay,
Rakesh.
ma'am. Yeah, though I can't talk to you all, at least let me share my slides with you all. Like,
Quickly. 1 minute, just
yeah.
scroll down. If you're so keen, since you have been texting me, so very quickly. Yeah, 1 minute. So that we are on
Yeah,
time for the next
doing it,
session.
ma'am.
Yeah, yeah. Please go ahead. We can see
Yeah.
it. Yeah, it's visible. Yeah. You can, with the slide, you can speak something, Rakesh, if you want to. This is excellent slides. You have 1 minute. Yeah, 1 minute you can speak if you want to. That's it. Yeah.
The Bangladesh is a country like, which is clearly, according to IDMC, like 7,000 Bangladeshis were displaced on average every year by natural disasters. And IPCC has already said in 1990 itself, like the greatest single impact of climate change would be on the human migration itself. Mummy. The countries at risk of despairing, as I've said you in the conclusion earlier, Kiribati is a country which is at risk for now, and Tuvalu, this is the least polluting country back. This is among the most affected by the global warming. Maldives, the current sea level is a main threat to this country today. And you see, World Bank wants that every state in the country, I mean, in the world, around 140 million people would be migrated within the countries by 2050, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Latin America. And climate migrants. Actually, according to Geneva Convention, like there are some, reasons given to call people as a refugee, but unfortunately, there was nothing mentioned in the Geneva Convention, like they cannot be called as a refugees like these climate migrants. And this has some statistical information like the Pacific lines, which are like now like where you can say that climate change is a major driver for migration. And South Asia, like you see India, and like you can see it in the graph, like how India, like where many displacements have taken place by natural disasters. And finally, this is like something, how can we protect? The countries have to work together in order to support all the climate migrants. Paris COP agreement and Sendai framework for disaster risk and the global compact for migration. And UN have to, like UN special rapporteur on human rights and climate change, they have to examine the issues surrounding the climate change and human mobility and guide international climate-induced displacement. And finally, its conclusion. So as I've said you earlier, the climate change is increasing the frequency and intensity of the natural hazards, and it's been a main reason for human migration. And like in one sentence, I think the new thinking and practical approaches are required to address these threats that climate-related migration poses to human security and well-being. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you to all the participants for those very engaging and interesting presentations in the session. So basically, when we talk about climate as a reason for migration, well, it's a problem across the world, not confined to South Asia, but yes, in South Asia, since many of the presentation, they speak about South Asia. So overpopulation, poverty, underdevelopment, these are some of the reasons resulting in unsustainable development, creating demographic changes, both within the borders and the international borders. Further pressure on the resources like water, agriculture, lands, coastal habitats, pushing environmental refugees. So I think these are some of the issues which have been highlighted. And we need a kind of a cooperation both at the regional level, at the community level, in the international level. And education plays a very critical role, which has been highlighted by some of the scholars about the Soka University, and also in India, where we have such initiatives. So I think the countries, whether regional, India, Nepal, or other countries, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, or international, we need to collaborate, as well as we need to take certain measures at the national and the community level in order to mitigate the issue of climate crisis, so that in future climate migrants or the climate refugees, they can be managed and we do not result in further migration of the people owing to climate change. So with that, once again, interesting presentations, and over to the organizers. And of course, thank you for inviting me here to chair this wonderful session. I'm sure everyone enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed moderating this session. Thank you.
So I'll propose the vote of thanks and then we'll end. Distinguished speakers, chairs, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the third session. It is my honor to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of NICE to all who have graced us with their presence and contributed their parts to make this event a resounding success. First of all, we would like to express our profuse gratitude and sincere thanks to Professor Bharti Chhibber for agreeing to the session today. Our sincere thanks also goes to all speakers for being part of the event and delivering such a comprehensive and convincing presentation. We are really honored to have all the speakers with us here today. We would like to acknowledge our gratitude to our friends from the diplomatic community, experts, academia, media, and different organizations. Finally, I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for our audience who participated in the webinar and those who are watching us live on our YouTube channel. Thank you for your valuable time and attention and for making the session productive with your questions. We are truly honored to have all of you with us and hope to stay connected with you in future as well. It's really been a pleasure. Also, do join us at our next session. Thank you very much.